You know that feeling when you scroll through a dozen gaming laptops, each promising buttery smooth frame rates, and you start wondering if any of them will actually live up to the hype without draining your wallet? I've been there, staring at spec sheets and trying to separate the marketing fluff from the stuff that actually matters when you sit down to game after a long day or try to squeeze a quick video edit into a coffee break. Before I dive into the details, just a heads up, link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The Asus ROG Strix G from 2019 lands in the middle of that crowded space. On paper it's got a 9th Gen Intel Core i7-9750H, a GTX 1650, 16GB of DDR4 RAM, and a full terabyte PCIe SSD all wrapped in a 15.6-inch IPS panel. Those are the kind of numbers that make you think, maybe I can finally ditch my desktop for a portable rig. But the real question is whether those components translate into a satisfying day-to-day experience, and more importantly, whether they do it at a price that feels fair for the performance you actually get. Let's start with who this machine feels built for. If you're a college student or a young professional who wants to play titles like Fortnite, Apex Legends, or Valorant at 1080p with medium to high settings, the Strix G is a solid match. The GTX 1650, while not the newest card on the market, still pushes those esports-style games comfortably above 60 frames per second, and the 16 GB of RAM means you won't be swapping out memory when you open a browser, Discord, and Steam all at once. The 1 TB Nvme SSD is another practical win. You get fast load times for games and plenty of room for a growing library without needing an external drive. Now, if your definition of gaming leans heavily toward AAA titles with ray tracing, ultra-high textures, or you're hoping to push 144 Hz on the display, this isn't the laptop you should be betting on. The GTX 1650 lacks the raw horsepower to keep up with those demands, and the 60 Hz IPS screen will bottleneck you before the GPU even shows its limits. In practice, I've seen Cyberpunk 2077 dip into the low 30s at 1080p, which is still playable if you're willing to turn down the visual bells and whistles, but it won't be the buttery experience you might expect from a gaming label. One of the hidden trade-offs that shows up once you actually open the lid is the thermal system. Asus equips the Strix G with what it calls an ROG intelligent cooling setup, dual 12V fans, anti-dust vents, and a series of heat pipes. In a typical gaming session lasting an hour, the fans kick up to a noticeable hum, but they keep the CPU temps under control, hovering around the low 80s Celsius. If you're in a quiet apartment, you'll hear that fan noise, but it's not a scream, it's more of a steady where that becomes background. The real downside appears when you push the laptop for longer stretches, say, a marathon League of Legends weekend. After about 2 hours the fans spin up faster, and the chassis starts to feel warm to the touch, especially near the bottom. It's not a failure, but it's a reminder that this isn't a desktop-class cooling solution. Battery life is another practical consideration that many reviewers gloss over. The Strix G ships with a 48Wh battery, which feels generous for a gaming laptop, yet the power draw of the i7 and the GTX 1650 quickly erodes that capacity. In my own testing, I got roughly 3 to 3.5 hours of mixed-use, some web browsing, a couple of YouTube videos, and a short game session. If you plan to game unplugged, you'll need to keep the power brick handy, or you'll be forced into low-power settings that diminish the very experience you bought the machine for. On the software side, the laptop comes with Windows 10 Home and the usual suite of Asus utilities. The RGB keyboard is a nice aesthetic touch, and the perky backlighting is configurable via the Armoury Crate app. It's functional, not just for show. You can assign lighting zones to different game profiles, which helps you know at a glance whether you're in work mode or battle mode. The Wi-Fi 5, 802.11 AC, is competent for most home networks, though if you have a newer Wi-Fi 6 router you won't be leveraging the latest speeds. That said, the Gigabit Ethernet port is a reliable fallback for competitive gamers who need the lowest possible latency. So, who should actually click Add to Cart? If you're a student who needs a laptop that can both handle coursework, think video editing in Adobe Premiere, or running virtual machines for programming classes and give you a decent gaming experience on the side, the Strix G hits a sweet spot. Its storage capacity alone eliminates the need for external drives, and the 16 GB of RAM future-proofs you for a few years of software updates. The price point, which usually lands in the mid-$1000 range for a refurbished or lightly used model, reflects